All right. Well, thank you, David. Thank you for inviting me to do this too. It's fun. It's been interesting. Um, as I've been making my notes, kind of going back and realizing over the last about 8 months, um, what we've accomplished, what we've, the challenges and all of that, um, this project has brought up and we've kind of worked through. So what I'm going to do is just I'm going to start just giving you a little bit of background on the stations. We'll kind of talk about the proposal that I made actually a few years ago about amalgamating, some of the challenges we ran into, lessons learned, and then I've got some pictures to share. If you have questions or anything like that along the way, please, there's the other thing I ran into is as I was putting it together, there's so many details. It can kind of get lost in any one of these subjects. So if there's any questions, please let me know as we work through, and
One
we'll
quick question: is everybody seeing the first slide, which is more of a title slide?
Yeah, we got it.
Awesome, thanks.
okay. So yeah, let's go to the next slide, David. So Corus operates two radio stations in Guelph, 1460 CJOY AM and CIMJ 1061 Magic FM, and then two in Kitchener, CJDV 1075 Dave Rocks and CKBT 91.5 The Beat. So the CGLY is a 10 kilowatt DA2, CMJ is a 50 kilowatt Omni, and they're a co-located site in the kind of south west of Guelph, technically Puslinch. CJDV is a directional 6 kilowatt max, 2.5 kilowatt average. Kind of, it's in the north, and I can show you a slide. I'll get to that slide in a second. And then CKBT is a 10 kilowatt max, 3.5 kilowatt average. The studio facilities in Guelph are owned by Corus and have been owned by the stations since the late 60s. And CGI moving to location 72. CMJ was established, was built up and went on air around 1980. The Kitchener facility is and was leased. CJDV and CKBT moved to them from two separate locations. CKBT was in downtown Kitchener. CJDV was in Cambridge, and they moved to the Sports World location in 2009. So if we go to the next slide, I'm not sure how well I tried to kind of get a map that shows everything. I don't know how well you can see it, but right around the center of the map is the Kitchener Studios, and then just slightly to the right, to the east, is the CJDV transmitter site. The point at the far north is the Guelph Studios on Speedvale Avenue in Guelph. And then below that, south of that. So to give you an idea of distance, the distance between the Guelph Studios and the CGOY and CIMJ site is about 8K. And so that's, and then the beat site, CKBT, is just north of Paris, right at the bottom, kind of on the left side of the map. So the Paris site kind of points northeast. The Dave site points kind of northwest. And then the others, the CJLY is again on a northeast bearing, and CIMJ is a 50 kilowatt Omni. So it stretches. You can pick it up from roughly Ingersoll right through to about the 400, depending on terrain and all of that. So, and let's go to the next slide, David. The proposal was to combine the Kitchener and Guelph offices into one location, looking at operational and future capital costs, and to bring the teams together. Remote work and the pandemic, the remote work, all of these things left the two offices very empty. But this wasn't so. This all started a few years ago. Actually, in 2019, um, the management team of Kitchener and Guelph were overlapping, and so we had more and more managers working across both locations, and so the teams were working together more. And at that point, I put a proposal together, and that was to move Guelph to Kitchener because Kitchener was kind of the more central site. And it's a newer site. It was built in 2009, so the infrastructure was um, a little bit more ready to accept another studio or two. The one thing that we discovered is that the STLs from there would be a problem, but the studio build itself would be a bit simpler build. And at that time, so that went to a leadership in late 2019, and they kind of said thanks, and that was that. So fast forward a couple of years to August 2023, and I reached back out to Julie Edwards, who's the VP of Facilities, because at that point we've got the Kitchener office with about 7,000 square feet, the Guelph office with about 12,000 square feet, and we've got 4 to 6 people in each building. Other than the on-air staff, most of the people were working remotely. They would drop in. We'd have a few more on some days, but we had a lot of room that we didn't need. And again, my suggestion at that point was um, to sell the Guelph property and to move into the Kitchener location because it was more central, and because up to that point, Corus kind of wasn't interested in being in property ownership, um, and so that's that was my proposal. Julie suggested that because of looking to cut costs, she suggested that, well, we need to put a business case together. So we need to look at what are the pros and cons of moving everything to Kitchener versus moving everything to Guelph. And what the outcome of that, so that looked at operational, that looked, we tried to anticipate what it meant for promotions, what it meant for sales, what it meant for engineering, what it meant for ongoing, building costs, maintenance costs, and all of that. And what we discovered, and I was surprised at the time, was that there was a significant savings to actually let the Kitchener office to move from the Kitchener office to Guelph, even though it wasn't quite as central when it comes to again the promotional activities, that kind of thing. And we put a rough budget together at that point, submitted it, and at that point they kind of said, "Oh, okay, that's interesting," and they didn't. That would have been, let's see, when was it? That would have been roughly around October 2023, and they basically said thanks and didn't hear anything. In late March 2024, I received a call from Riza Saifu, who's the director of TV and radio engineering, and he said, "You got a green light." I said, "I got a green light." He says, "Yeah, you got a green light. We're going to move the Kitchener operation to Guelph. Get your budgets together, get your plans together," and he said, and part of it, he said, "Can we complete this by August 31, 2024?" And I think the blood drained from my face at that point. I'm used to these projects having, months to plan for it, never mind trying to execute it in what would be 6 months, 7 months. We had, draft rough budgets, but we had nothing solid at that point. But we said, well, we can give it a best try. And as things went, it took a couple of months to get design and budgetary approval, and contractors weren't available, so the project slid, and it didn't hold to that. But that was their kind of original vision. So does that make sense so far? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you like
Any
the next slide?
questions or yes, let's go to the next slide. So some of the challenges that we ran into. Again, the original timeline, as I mentioned, was to complete the move by fiscal year end. Um, it didn't happen. The other big challenge was costs. And so looking at everything was to keep it as low as possible. And so I said, okay, so that's reusing equipment where we can. Um, that was, we had a number of racks that had been decommissioned from various places. So reusing racks from Toronto. Um, that we were. It's weird to say fortunate, but we had the fortune of inheriting equipment from both Hamilton and Kingston locations, which Corus has Corus has shut down. The LXC touchscreen consoles. It's a Wheatstone plant, so the LXC touchscreen consoles from Kingston and Neumann microphones and mic processors and that from Hamilton, um, which ended up, I mean, being a huge savings there. I mean, the Neumanns I would never have been able to fit in the budget anyway. Um, the STL shots to CJDV and CKBT. CKBT was the biggest concern because it's about a 36-kilometer hop. As we dug into the Guelph building, power was an issue because the infrastructure that existed at this time last year, even though there was three-phase power available to the building, it had only been built up on a single phase, and HVAC wasn't backed up on the generator, and of course the generator was only single phase. So this was a big issue for us. The Guelph building hadn't, the carpets were threadbare. It looked like it did about 25 years ago. Um, we had broadcast phone systems in both locations that were EOL, and we're putting Band-Aid on and praying every night that they keep working. And 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 then the other big challenge to it is that there's two of us that we're looking after the two locations, and we're trying to run around and keep normal operations running while building a brand new system, and sometimes needing the same part in both places. So um, that was interesting, to say the least. And so if we move to the next slide, David, um, some of the issues that came up, actually, just before we get to that, no, we can go here. So some of the issues that came up, we received one of the LXC consoles, the first one we received from Kingston, to arrive had an issue where audio over IP audio was distorting. And it was such a such a rare issue. Um, it was one of the developers had seen it in one of their blades, in all the ones that had been produced. And so, when we were working with tech support, we were going through network problems, and I think we checked everything on the system. Ended up having to send the blade back for repair, and that ended up pushing us back, I think, about 2 to 3 weeks, just trying to get through that. A KVM system that we could get in and we could manage it any way we wanted to, but it didn't want to pass video. Gear that like network switches and different pieces of gear that had been on for years, and we committed the cardinal sin of unplugging it. When we plugged it back in, it wasn't there. We ended up having a late night in Kitchener one night when we were removing a UPS and bypassing it, where we had to shut everything down. That we had a mix engine, a couple of mic processors, and a blade all not come back up again. Now they were 2009. They were all 2009, 2010 installations. So It didn't owe us anything, but it wasn't timing wasn't favorable. Um, a phone system again. So our phones were using an NX in Guelph, NX6, and it was the older Telos 1x6 in Guelph, and using POTS lines, and we're just looking at it going, this needs to be updated. So we went with a Telos VX system on a virtual server. A clone, it was a clone of what London had done. Obviously, with the type timelines, I didn't, there wasn't time to go and research and try and find a new solution or whatever. And London's had put theirs in, and I think it's fair to say, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, David, but once the initial bugs were wrung out, it's been very, very stable. Um,
Well, yeah, the challenge was the VXS was fairly new at the time that we that we put it in, and we not only had it running. If we were to have it running on bare metal servers, that would have been one thing. But to have it on the VMs, there was a lot of issues with timing. Even though we
right.
had a master clock and everything, there were a lot of things to work out with the VMs themselves. But once those were worked out, everything has been pretty stable since.
So we benefited from that in that we haven't had any of those issues, but technology being what it is, we had some of our own. One of them was the AES to get the audio out of the Telos system into the Wheatstone system. We used AES 67, and there were some challenges with with firmware versions and that kind of thing that kind of got in our way and slowed us down a little bit there. Um, and then STL path obstruction, and I'm going to get into the STL system because that was the biggest part of the research and development for us. And so I can kind of get into the path obstruction discussion. So what we had currently in Kitchener was 900, your traditional Mosley Starlink 950 megahertz link. Reliability is good. It works well. Um, but there's limited products on the market now that do that. Um, they are still relatively expensive. They're one directional. Most of them, some of them will have a small data stream, that's capable of encoding RDS, but nothing that you could use beyond that. So at that point, I said, well, what else is out there? What else can we do? And I was speaking with Morley Fountain, who's actually retired from Corus, Lyle Casolo over at Novanet, and started looking into IP links, licensed IP links. So, had to be licensed. Um, and what we found was by going to something like that, we can combine audio, data, control systems, or whatever we want to put on that, given that it will run over an IP network. Um, and it would also solve internet issues at some of the transmitter sites. Um, the funniest part, the Cambridge site, which is right basically in the middle of town, but it's kind of nestled up and behind some buildings, has the worst internet of all of the sites that I've got. Because basically there's no Rogers cable, and Bell has wired a twisted pair line up to that site, and that's all that's there. And if we'd like to fix it, we can ante up for it. So the Dragon Wave. So we went with a Dragon Wave 13 gig licensed IP link from the Guelph site to both the Cambridge and Paris sites. They are pushing. We've got 100 pardon me, 100 megabit bandwidth bidirectionally. So currently we are using um, a very small amount. We're using it just basically as traditional audio STL. Within the next couple of weeks, we're going to have data backups that will include all of our music master scheduling, content libraries, um, trying to think of what else. But basically, we'll have a full backup. Um, yeah, yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, no, it's not that, but funny what comes out. Um, yeah, so the plan is to do that, and also we've got Davicom site controllers at all the sites. So I've got a vision to get the Davicoms at the studio talking to the Davicoms at the site to pass back and forth information, and kind of explore how can we more tightly integrate um, the control of those sites. So I'd mentioned STL obstruction issues, and this is one of the big lessons learned for me. And part of it was I ended up managing more than I originally expected. But uh, what happened was when they had, I guess the first thing is they had a real challenge. 13 gigahertz is such a small bandwidth, such a small such a high frequency and a narrow beam width that the tower crew really had a challenge peaking them. And what we discovered was that in the brief, they kept the antennas relatively low, and we've ended up with some Fresnel zone infringement at the Guelph end. Um, it hasn't affected reliability yet, but both systems are lower than what they should be. And so what I've learned on that is that the next time we do something like this, because it's fiber, we're going to put those radios as high as we can go on the tower because there's no concern about losses like there would be in a coaxial line, um, to try and to try and head off that problem in the future. But yeah, any questions on that before I feel like I'm kind of blasting through here. So is there any questions or
Well,
thoughts on that or?
one question: what kind of latency figures are you getting from your Dragon Wave 13 gig connection?
You wouldn't if you were in the studio, um, and you put the mic on and you were speaking, you wouldn't hear it.
Wow, that's good.
So it is. So
And
and I should say we've got the IP codecs we're using. We're using two IP codecs, two different types. We've got a tie line and the Comrex Brick 3. The tie line, if it's on the air, you might not be able to talk and listen to the air feed at the same time. But the Comrex, we've got it so that the tie line is bridged across two networks. It's bridged across the Dragon Wave as well as internet. So we've allowed it to have a little bit more buffering and latency because it is on the internet. Um, the Comrex is solely on the Dragon Wave, and so I just thought, let's see what this thing can do. And we decided to use the Opus lossless encoding algorithm. And yeah, if you were in the studio and you pop the mic on, you would probably not know that it was being encoded over an IP network. So it also helps that we're of the 100 megabytes, we're probably using you know maybe 3 meg of that 100. So there's nothing really there to uh, compete with it. So. And the other thing we're doing too with that, and with the fact that we went back and had a look at the heights of the antennas, and we do have room. We don't have room at the Guelph end to go up any further. But we do have room at both of the transmitter sites. So we're monitoring it. I'm keeping logs through our Davicom of the signal, the send and receive strength, and we're just mapping it, and we're going to watch it for about the next 6 or 8 months and make a decision there on whether it makes sense to actually move those dishes up or not. Like I say, the signals aren't what they should be, what we call for in the brief, but they're acceptable given once the trees grow in that we don't see the signal drop right off. So broadcast phones, we talked about that a little bit already. So the timeline, the overall timeline, um, um, kind of went like this. So in June 27th, so beginning of June it was roughly the beginning of June, end of May that I finally got every budgets approved and got the green light. So June 27th, construction began. CGOI moved to a direct layout. Demolition began on the east side of the building. All studios except CIMJ and VT2 were decommissioned. And CMJ, the morning show stayed throughout. We gave them the option to go to Kitchener to a temporary studio, and they said no, 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 we're staying. So um, it would have been nice. It would have made things a little bit easier if they had moved, but um, like I say, they were happy. So um, in August, we started construction on the TSR room. We moved it upstairs. So originally in the old world, it was in the basement. And so since we needed to add in a three-phase power distribution, we just built a brand new room. We took the old boardroom and 10 racks went in, and that started in August. Um, by September, we were demolishing the west side of the building so on the lower level underneath the studios. Around the beginning, again, around that time, CMJ also moved to a temporary studio, which, again, that was delayed, but something's always delayed with these projects, I suppose. And yeah, so the studio that was CMJ is decommissioned, and the other studios were at the point where we were starting to build into them again. The contractors had completed their work, and we could get in and start getting mill work and such in. Let's see. By October, front office demo began, and the subsequent construction. The STL links went in and were peaked and were online as of October. And then by November 1st, most of the renos in the building were complete. The guys were still, there were touch-ups here and there, and I was chasing around the flooring guy for a while trying to get him to put um, some of the trim up. But for the most part, renos were complete. And we moved CKBT in the week of November 12th, which also happened to be the same time we moved staff over that week as well. And CJDV moved the following week on the 19th.
Should I be cycling through some slides here, or am I on
We're
the correct
going
slide?
to, I was just, actually, can you go to the next slide, David? So this is the layout, the new layout. So at the bottom of the page is the west side of the building, and that's where our 3 studios are. We've ended up with 4 voice track / podcasting rooms. You can see the engineering rack room, or we're calling it TSR. And then, the whole front of the building was kind of the last part to be renovated. And if you go to the following slide, the lower level there. So that on-air host lounge, kind of right in the middle on the right side, was the engineering room. And in that setup, they had um, the broadcast equipment there. They had in the storage space above it, they had the IT infrastructure. And then in that engineering room to the right of it is where they had the STL transmitters and feeds. And well, it worked. There's been so much, we're so much more dependent on networks now, IP networks, that it was getting unruly because we were having to run so many lines back and forth between rooms. So one of the things that we did when we moved upstairs is everything went in that one room, and it's been, it's been a godsend. It's been the way to go. And then, pardon me, most of the rest of the basement is offices. Some of them hoteling, some of them assigned, and then the large boardroom on the kind of southeast corner there, top right. So, and I'm going to go out of order on you, David. Can we go back to the lessons learned slide? Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so lessons learned. So delegation in this project was a big, big, big thing. And if I had it to do it again, I would have probably two more people on the team. Um, there's a few things that are they're they're minor in the whole scheme of things, but there were a couple of things that I just didn't have time to focus on all the details. I ended up so generally when Corus does these projects, I'll be working with somebody so the engineer will work with somebody from facilities who will manage the building renovation, and then the engineer will manage the technical and the studios. And our facilities people are so busy with other locations and changes in Toronto that while I had them as an advisor consultant, um, I basically I was the liaison and ran um, uh, the renovations and the liaison with the general contractor. We were fortunate in that my electrician happened to know a good general contractor, and it wasn't, I was very concerned about getting somebody in that I could just go here, point in a direction. Here's the plan, go. But that was a big help. But because I was doing more of that, I had less time to focus on all of the details. So there were little things in the studios where things don't quite meet up. There was some cable management that I would have liked to have seen in the TSR room that now we're looking at it going, okay, we can work with this, but it would have been nice if I could have had one more person that was more experienced with builds. And it's something I could have done, but again, it was a time thing. Over communication is key. I think anybody who's involved in any of these type of projects realize that you think you tell everybody what you want, and they come back and they tell you something that you don't even recognize. And so, yeah, getting the drawings out there. And sometimes I really got to say, I'm very thankful for our networking team here, because sometimes it was me drawing things on a piece of paper, taking a picture with my phone and sending it to Bill in Toronto, and he would look at it and make sense out of it and come up with a solution that worked. And then, most of the time it's much more formal than that, but it's you got to kind of play the ball where it lies. And probably in the midst of all this, managing staff was one of the biggest challenges. You know, I uh, I was very thankful that when staff was brought in on the changes and we made the announcement, there were a couple kind of non-managers that listened to the presentation, looked at what we presented, and were on board right away and said, well, that's a really good idea. Um, and so that helped shape things for the rest of the staff. But as we got closer to the date and as things got more real, shall we say, um, you know, we we started to see a little more pushback. Now, the two offices were only about 20 kilometers apart, but there was things like looking for compensation for mileage for, some of it was like that. Some people, we had one who actually wanted to kind of reopen and renegotiate their salary, and it's like, okay, you know, we're not doing that right now.
It's kind of beyond the scope of an engineering department.
Well, it is. I mean, the way things kind of went, I got pulled into a lot more than I normally would. Um, and again, at that point too, HR was involved, and so you kind of ended up working with them as a consultant. And actually, in the one case, they actually stepped in, and that was an extreme kind of very odd. The person had some odd expectations. Without betraying confidence, we'll just leave it at that. Um, but even some of the things were with on the engineering team is kind of realizing, um, where their strengths are and trying to put them in the places where, um, you know, even though you can't always do it, trying to put them in places of success. And I've got to one person in particular who is very, very good when it comes to the maintenance side of things, and enjoys the build, but there's challenges and stresses that come up that make it a bigger challenge than kind of the regular day to day. So um, it's interesting, and like I say, you can't always kind of put them in a place where they're not going to be uncomfortable, but it's nice to be able to, if you can or have that in mind, it's nice to be able to delegate um, as much as possible. So, and at this point, um, I'm just going to give you kind of a brief highlight of the studios and what we did, and then I've got a bunch of pictures to share. So highlights, it's a Wheatstone IP-based system. In this case, we ran fiber drops, multi-mode fiber drops to edge switches in the studios for Wheatstone. I use copper for the rest of the network and as a backup. The voice track studios again are using the Wheatstone, and we use the screen builder application to make customized mixers for them, and some coding behind them so that um, we can combine 3 or 4 steps that they commonly do into one. So I suppose like a macro. Devicom Cortex for monitoring and control, and central UPS system that supports the studios and the TSR room. And we just had our generator that we've been waiting for too long. It just was dropped on the pad today. So that's the last part of the project, is getting that hooked up, and we'll be working with Hydro and the electricians in the next couple of weeks to get that new 3-phase generator online. Um, so actually, if you go back just a slide there, David. So this is Studio One. This is before the renovation. And then if you advance it, the next 2 or 3 slides are after the renovation. So I tried as much as I could to get stuff off the desk, but our on-air people like to have that stuff in around them. So that is CIMJ. You got Will Menzies there hiding over in the corner. And yeah, if you want to move on, this is the Studio 2. So it was CIMJ in the old world. And then if you go forward, and this is Simon. It's now CJDV, Dave Rocks. That's Simon McGee. And again, we've got the Wheatstone-based systems, touchscreens everywhere. Put the screens up on. That was something that I saw actually at the Corus Ottawa site. They had the monitors up up high, and I really like the idea of trying to get it off the desk as much as possible and open up the sight lines across the table. So if you go to the next slide, and that's what Simon would be looking at. That's his view, and then out into the hall through the window. And the next one, and then that's kind of from the door looking at the whole room. So each room is set up for 4 people, around the desk. And then keep going, David. And then this is, oh, that's the same room. Okay. So yeah, there. So this is CKBT. This was formerly a production room. Um, it is the largest room, so that table is virtually a circle. Again, it's got 4 people around it. We've allowed room for more, should they want it, or should they have an artist in, or whatever the case may be, trying to make them as flexible as possible. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, and that's looking over Joey's shoulder. Keep going. No, 2 of the same. There we go. Yeah, and that's kind of what he's looking at there. So you can see the Wheatstone, the LXC on the left side, and the Media Touch, and then Vox Pro, and the VX phone kind of as you come back towards us in the picture. And keep going there, David. So this was that room previously. It was a big U shape. That D75 was still running beautifully. It's gotten harder and harder over the years to get parts for it, but was still operating quite well when we took it out of service. We were able to donate it to the Guelph University station, who are using them, and was having the same issues we were having with getting parts, and was very, very grateful for it. So it was good to help them out. And let's go to the next. So this is the new production room. It's a Pro Tools studio. It's kind of tied into, there's a blade there and an Apollo below it, and we actually just got approved to update the Macs in there. So within a couple months, we'll have new Macs for Pro Tools and everything up on the latest and greatest. And I think there's a couple more slides there for, yeah, one at the back, and then there's one kind of looking to the left into the booth. And yep. And so let's keep going. Here's the rack room. This was got the 10 racks. The cable management that I was talking about before is my biggest disappointment right here. But we're working on cleaning that up and getting it better documented. There was a bit of a wild west while we were building of just trying to get things working. So I think there's a couple more pictures of the engineering room. So down this end, we've got our STLs in the first 2 racks, STLs, codecs, that kind of thing. And then CJOY and CIMJ are in the 2 nearest racks. And then as you go to the next one, again, the 2 furthest away are CJDV and CKBT. And then the last 2 have codecs for remotes and for tying into other studios and all of that kind of thing, as well as the Davacoms in there, some test gear, pardon me, some audio test gear and that type of thing. And I think there might be a couple more left. Yeah, so this is the voice track room before the renovation. So at that point, we had the touchscreen screen builders. It was just a matter of updating the rooms. So that part of it was kind of, we took it apart and were able to put it back together without too much trouble. And then yeah, if you advance, you can see we scored a conference table from Toronto, and the idea was to be able to get as many people around it, use it for podcasting, use it for voice tracking, or whatever other production might be required. And keep going. So yeah, that's looking at it from the door. And then this is another voice track room that's between the 2 studios. So it will be, we haven't set it up yet, but it will be also set up so that it can go to air on one or the other studios if it's needed, or if there's a requirement for it. And next one. Yeah, there's sitting behind the desk. We're
I'm
kind of lucky with
guessing
this.
the cable management is a work in progress at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, a little. It's hard. And we found some USB hubs that we were using, so we wouldn't have 6 or 7 cables running from the PCs down and back up. But it still seems to, you get more than one cable on the desktop, and they all seem to want to climb around each other and get tangled. So, but and one of the nice advantages of the locations, we're right next to the Speed River, so it's looking out that window. You kind of look right down on the Speed River going by. So, and next one. Oh, and this is the new boardroom. Um, I think that's it. Yep. So that's kind of been my been our life the last 8 months or so. And yeah, I don't know if there's any questions or any thoughts or anything like that, but that's kind of my story.
Would this be perhaps your biggest project to date, or
Um,
you've been you're 2 decades of experience, I believe, at least, right?
yeah, yeah, I kind of got in. It's a little over 25 years ago. Um, it would be in terms of scope, yes, it would be. I've managed studio builds before. I was involved with when I worked for Durham Radio. I was involved with a build in Peterborough for them. Um, but the scope of this, managing the general contractor, and basically managing all of the renos as well as all of the broadcast stuff, and trying to keep all of the regular day-to-day, you know, transmitter site visits and so on and so forth going. It's been the busiest 8 months of my career, and I'm thankful that it's starting to come down a little bit. So, but I'm also very thankful for the opportunity to do it. I mean, it's something that my wife at one point was saying to me, like all you do is work. And she was, and I knew I was pushing things a little bit, and thankful that she's gracious. But um, this is one of those things that comes along once in a career, and so it was very exciting to do. But it was very demanding, and um, it's not. I couldn't work at that level, you know, um, as a regular, um, kind of work mode.
Any further questions for Shawn? I appreciate you taking the time to show us this.
Sorry, I had a
Adam, oh,
if
go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I'm just what was your biggest challenge, Sean? I've done several of these and they can be quite taxing.
yeah. We got to a point in September. It was right around the beginning of September where we had a number of problems all hit at once.
Right.
And at that point, they wanted to move the stations about a month before we actually moved them.
Yeah.
And that was our target date. And within the same, I'm going to say roughly week, we ran into the problem with the new console that we were depending on distorting the playout audio. Um, we brought in one of the uh, consoles that we had decommissioned and had a different problem with it. And this was one of the things where an older 15-year-old power supply, a switch mode power supply didn't come back up again. And then we were having problems with the Geffen KVM system. So we hit all of these things all at once. And it was just, there were a few days through there where I'm just like, I don't know what we're going to do, and
Yeah.
and it took, so we're bouncing from one thing to the other and still trying to get rooms completed and trying to manage, um, the general contractor. And yeah, there was a couple weeks in September that just the sheer volume, it wasn't one thing. It was just the fact that they all happened at once. And that I would say was the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I mean, that's what my experience has been too. It's like sheer terror and hell, and then all of a sudden it's done, and oh, that was fun. Let's do it
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, well, we were even talking earlier because I went over the presentation with Spencer here, and because he's lived through it all with me, and I'm like, am I missing any issues? Like now that we're past them, they don't seem like that big a deal. But at the time, the stress on, okay, we need to get moved, we need to get this done now. Like, and was so great that, I know some of it, it gets in your head. And, um, yeah, I think we lost a little bit of time just with kind of trying to draw back and take a breath. Okay, we can delay, we can, we don't, we were fortunate with the Kitchener facility that we actually still have it. The lease doesn't expire until June. So it
Uh,
was more self-imposed deadlines than it was, okay, we have to be actually out of that facility and have it torn apart by, say the end of December or something like that. So,
Is
but
there anything still running through it at this point?
no, so we had some virtual systems that we were accessing up until a couple of days ago, and our IT team was able to vMotion everything over to Guelph. And so yeah, that's the next step too. There is to go and decommission. Um, Likely the virtual servers and that infrastructure will be redeployed in Guelph. I'm still waiting on confirmation on that, but. And there's still some gear, some less important gear that we're going to be bringing over to use at the Guelph location. But um, for was it Tuesday? Yesterday, as of yesterday, um, there's no more services that are running in Kitchener that we're actively using.
I'll bet that was a happy day.
Well, it was. I mean, it was working, but it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, that's just freed up. Now I can have my contractor in to do X project. Now we can get in there and get that equipment out of there. And yeah, you always run the risk of, while we've got a dedicated circuit going between them, um, there's always a chance that that drops out, and then the problems that it causes when those resources aren't available. So.
Okay. Any last questions for Shawn?
I'm just gonna say, I see you have no hair left, just like the rest of us. Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that's my kids or the job, but probably some combination of both.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Shawn, for taking the time to put this together and to walk us through your 2024, which was one to remember, one for the books for sure.